Welcome back into the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by Calhoun's. The holidays are fast approaching, and that means parties and family get-togethers, but it doesn't have to mean kitchen work. Give them 24 hours, and Calhoun's will provide the turkey and fixing. That is, and fixings. I think I just said fixing. That's not a very good spread. They do the fixings. Calhoun's, they can cook it up for you, and you don't have to do it. November 26th through December 25th. Mark those dates down. Just give them 24 hours and get the holiday Feed 5, Feed 10 packs. Calhoun's, the taste of Tennessee. All right, I want to welcome in the next round of panelists we have right here. Bob Hodge, who longtime sports writer in this town, who of course has been on the show since its inception. Show one. Right there we have Will Overstreet, former Vol and former NFL player. And down there from GoVols247.com recruiting expert Ryan Callahan. All right, gentlemen, let's talk a little bit and of course Chuck is still with us and his cowboy hat is still with us. Vols opened 1-4 on the season. I did not expect them to go 4-1 over the next 5 games. That's pretty impressive. So I tell you what, since they started poorly and have been playing well of late, when I ask you this question, let's do it in the same angle. Let's get the bad out of the way. I want to ask you best and worst coaching moves from Jeremy Pruitt on the season. Let's start with worst moves on the year for Jeremy Pruitt.
I think you can go back to the very first game when the week before, the 2 weeks before, the 3 weeks before, it was talk about we're going to play a lot of people. We're going to get in there, we're going to get this guy in, we're planning on playing a lot of people. And I think that set a bad tone that it took you a while to get over. Obviously, Georgia State probably had some sort of an impact on BYU. So I think that was probably the worst. I wasn't there at practice. I don't know how it went. But it just seems like when you're talking about a game and, we're going to play a lot of people, then you're thinking you're going to walk over them.
Yeah, and you had players after the game that said, you had some saying, no, we were prepared, and others said, no, we didn't see enough film on what they're doing. So to me, I agree with you completely. I think Georgia State.
I think the other big call you have to say is against BYU and close there to the end of regulation, why weren't you in a prevent defense? I mean, you very easily had that game, a team you could have won. You had 18 seconds left. All you have to do is stop them, tackle them in field, and it's pretty much ball game. And you're in a play that doesn't look anywhere close to that. So I think that was one of the big plays, as we talked about, just one call away that hurt you right now, because right now you'd be bowl eligible. These last 2 games would just be putting you in a much better bowl. So I think right now that has to be one of the ones that haunts them a little bit to this day.
Okay, do you guys, you don't have to say a different one. You can say a different one if you like. You can reiterate some of these. Where are you going?
Yeah, Georgia State's the one that stands out to me. Just the overall approach to that game, like Bob said, I think the way they kind of handled that one leading up to it was a mistake, and I think it kind of felt like a preseason game to players. I just think there's not any one thing you can point to, just sort of the thought that they could go into that game and maybe not have to rely on their starters and best players to carry the load. I think turned out to be a mistake because they clearly underestimated Georgia State across the board.
I agree, and just like that, the same thing with BYU. And maybe that's where you do call a timeout or you do something just because there was confusion there in the secondary. The other thing, John, how about some of the musical chairs with quarterbacks and how you made some, it seems like some impulsive or rash decisions on who's going to do what and putting somebody in and taking them out, and you're looking at it and wondering what's the rhyme or reason there.
You have gotten to a point where if a guy throws a bad ball, he comes out. That's
right.
Good point. In terms of the BYU thing, I'll play off of that. He put so much of that on Alontae Taylor's right at his feet. It's a normal way of saying it. He let it at his feet. He could have called prevent defense there, and it's not Taylor's fault. To me, you didn't do that whole series. You had everybody was up there at the line. It wasn't just Taylor. Now, Taylor was the one that got turned around for some reason, but you didn't have everybody playing 30 yards off the ball.
It's like you were defending the first down.
So the extension of that is I don't think he handled that well. If you make $4+ million a year, I don't want to hear you blame a player personally. It's your job to put him in the right spot. Now, if a guy goes rogue on you, that's a little different. But on that one, I thought he went too far on Alontae Taylor. All right, let's turn it around. Positives. What were his best coaching moves of the season?
Wow. I think I will go with not burying Jarrett Guarantano. When you had the opportunity after the Alabama game, after he, did he go rogue? Did he not go rogue? People still talking about that.
Turns out he went rogue, yeah.
Turns out he went rogue. And you didn't bury him because look at how important he's been since then. South Carolina, Kentucky, If you kind of just say, you're done, stand over here, hold your helmet, so keeping him involved with things, that's a pretty good coaching job right there, especially when the kid's getting so much heat from outside the program.
And his area of expertise, how about getting the defense to play so much better and helping with, I know you give the credit to the assistant coaches as well, but who saw the improvement in the defensive line being so much better when you had so many new players there? So, I think you got to give him some credit for that.
6 weeks ago, a lot of the message boards were, can we please fire Tracy Rocker?
Right.
Yeah.
Probably not going to do that now.
Yeah, no, I think it has to start. I know it's a little bit before the season, but who he hired. Bringing in experienced guys. Would a coach do that? There were guys that could push back against him, and Jim Chaney being an example of that to help you through this. Getting a defensive coordinator and still being the guy calling the defense then on. I think it's his next step as being a head coach of really realizing that's a difference than being a coordinator on a team and making different decisions based on that. So I think he grew a little bit this last year based on what he learned from year one. And I think that's come in a lot of different decisions, but it started by who he hired early on.
For me, it's the overall handling of the quarterback position. Chuck mentioned the musical chairs. I think he's actually handled it much better than I would have expected after the open date and at the end of September. I think the decision to switch to Brian Maurer at the time was the right call. It gave Tennessee's offense some life. And then the decision to not bury Garantano and just the overall handling of that situation, I thought very savvy in the way he managed Garantano from bringing him off the bench in the next game to just not burying him overall. I thought everything about the way he and Garantano responded to that situation was kind of what you would expect from a more veteran coach, not a second-year coach.
I'll give him credit also for not allowing this team to quit. I've made no bones about the fact I'm not big on somebody who consistently says, I need new players. I don't think that helps motivate the guys you have. But you've had enough guys leave now that maybe you're down to the core who do believe maybe you ran up enough of those guys. But this team at 1-4, you had every reason to think that it's over.
Right.
It's done. A lot of teams would have fractured over the Garantano thing. Now, that speaks to him that a lot of the players didn't abandon him either. Mm-hmm. But credit the coaches for sticking with him. But just the overall not losing it, I'll put it this way. If this were last year, I think Pruitt might not have been able to keep it going in the right direction. Well, he couldn't last year. I think as a second-year coach, he had a little bit better handle on when to tap the brakes, when to hit the gas. Outside looking in, and who knows what they're going to do the next 2 weeks. But I just think that you give him credit for preventing a complete drive off the cliff, which I thought looked inevitable at 1-4.
And he's obviously gotten the older guys to participate more. They've gotten better. They've improved. And that's what you saw. You're talking about give me new guys. But now the old guys have bought in, and you're seeing them get better. That's been a big change as well.
Yes.
One other quick thing, a willingness to adapt. It's sort of a subtler thing, but the willingness to change up the practice routine to get Trey Smith involved in the game plan. They're not having much contact at all on Thursdays, and that sort of toned things down. It's going to help manage them throughout these final weeks, too. I think they're going to be a fresher team because of the way they've done it. But to get him involved and up to speed each week, I think has made a big difference in that offensive line.
And let me go backwards a little bit. I meant to mention this earlier when we were talking about worst coaching moves. I was going to say not being ready for Kyle Trask at Florida. But that's actually, we talk about Georgia State and BYU, the improvement has come since then. No, it was later in the season.
Yeah.
You could make an argument their worst performance of the year where they just completely didn't show it was Florida. Because, 34-3, you're not even on the same field with them. They're throwing over the middle all day. There's no fight back. To come back where they've gone 4-1 since then, that's pretty impressive.
Yep.
To me, that Florida game, it wasn't just, Georgia State and BYU for so far back. That Florida game was horrible.
Yes.
So to have turned it after that, more impressive of a turnaround.
And the 4-1, they only lost to Alabama. Which that was pretty much a given.
All right. When we come back, we're going to talk about the potential NFL draftees on this year's Tennessee team. And you've got talent there. You're talking about some older guys buying in and playing well now. All right, now you have to look at it instead of just, let's clear all these old guys out. Now you're going to say, how do we replace these old guys? That's what we'll talk about next. Come on back on the Sports Source.
Thanks for choosing us to entertain,
complete with tension and biting humor,
and inform you. This is the Sports Source.